We may be able to locate another energy emission from the radar room. When we find that meteor, we'll find Dr. Wily.
In the 1940s, foundational science fiction writer and biochemist Isaac Asimov devised 3 defining laws for the future of robotics. 1. A robot must not harm any human or create a situation in which a human can be harmed. 2. Robots must be given orders by humans unless those orders directly contradict with the first law. And 3. A robot must preserve its own existence so long as it does not contradict either the first or second law. Over the decades, Asimov's law of robotics have dictated the direction for the ethics of robotics and their inevitable growth in the modern day. Science fiction, however, has actually gone against Asimov's laws in multiple ways. Whether it be the T-1000 in the Terminator series, Ultron and the many robotic villains of the Marvel Universe, or even Bender Ramirez from Futurama, robots have gained not only more sentience, but also the ability to harm humanity, to disregard their rules and think for themselves, almost like humans, just with metallic skin and wired brains. And while these robots are examples of the failures of these laws, how our supreme mechanical overlords will rise up and destroy us one day, just because it doesn't adhere to the laws doesn't mean it's necessarily a bad thing. Even in the real world, Asimov's laws are finally being disregarded as limiting for the future of robotics and how in reality they've progressed to this day. And these faulty regulations, built on a foundation of speculation, escalate into something much more profound. That is to say, what if a robot could think for himself? What if they had their own personalities, their own thoughts and dreams? What if despite all odds, they could live alongside humans as equals? What if a robot had the rough equivalent of a human soul? This is Mega Man. Created by a small team of Capcom employees led by programmer Akira Kitamura, Keiji Inafune is a hack! During the late 1980s, Rockman, or Mega Man, is a franchise that spans not only video games of multiple genres, but also merchandise and spin-offs galore. From RPGs to fighting games, from racing titles to a plethora of anime, Mega Man has sort of become a staple of retro gaming, one of the big mascots of the video game world like Mario and Sonic, and a flagship title of his creator's company. With kick-ass music, iconic boss designs, and white-knuckle platforming, the Mega Man series is undeniable in its charm and its place next to the greats of the gaming world. And while Mega Man's publication has been rocky throughout the past decade or so, he's finally regained the popularity and mainstream notice that many projects have tried and failed to emulate. However, there is one version of Mega Man's story, one particular canon and interpretation of the character distinctly different from many other iterations of the franchise, that is often overlooked or at least forgotten by a majority of the people who know the Mega Man brand. Mega Man Megamix, and its subsequent continuation Mega Man Gigamix, was published originally in Kodansha's Comic Bonbon in the late 90s to the late 2000s. The mangaka, Hitoshi Ariga, is an artist with a lot under his belt, from character design work on recent mainline Pokemon titles to manga adaptations of video games and anime like the Big O or Klonoa. Despite his long resume of work, however, Ariga's most defining work is the Mega Man Megamix series, being reprinted in multiple countries and throughout multiple publications. Before getting into the nitty-gritty details of why Megamix and Gigamix are so damn good, I must preface, this is an overview of the entire manga, one that is still being sold through legal avenues such as Amazon or eBay. Read them, experience the glory of the story and how Ariga has evolved the canon of the Mega Man series into a jaw-dropping and exciting shonen battle series. Come back when you're done, or experience this blind and ruin the surprise of this ride Ariga concocted. We good?
Shut the fuck up!
Good. Let's get started. A long time ago, there was a young scientist that proposed an idea at the Robotics Institute of Technology. This student thought of the concept of creating a soul, defining individuality and personality within robots that could allow them to think for themselves. Be themselves despite their intended function, whoever that person may be. This student's hypothesis was rejected by the Robotics Institute, believing the idea to be asinine and against the intended purpose for robotics in the first place. Tools. Ways to eliminate needless labor. This student, undeterred from his vision, teamed up with a like-minded but radical student just like him. Together, they revolutionized the very definition of what a robot could be, before a bitter disagreement split their partnership in two. Flash forward to the year 2000 and X, and the man who dreamed of creating the robotic soul has finally reached his goal. Dr. Thomas Light has brought to life his latest and debatably most important creation, a household maintenance robot named Rock. They walk like a boy, talk like a boy, and is as morally upright as a Boy Scout. Rock was the example of everything Dr. Light worked toward and the fruits of his labor as he tried to create a new world. That was until Dr. Light's past caught up with him, the very partner he sought to change the world with, wanting to settle a petty score. And so, with his creations repossessed by his former friend Dr. Albert Wily, the city of Tokyo went under siege by Light's newly programmed robot masters. Rock, desiring to stop his brothers from destroying their home and wanting to protect humanity against the wishes of the good doctor, is remodified into a combat robot designed for justice and to stop his brethren from wreaking havoc across the world. Mega Man. Stopping his brothers before they literally nuke all of Tokyo, Dr. Wily escapes the grasp of Mega Man through his backup plan, the Wily numbers. And while the world is safe from Wily for a time, it isn't the last time he'll face Light's rival in his bid for world domination. This is the origin of Mega Man in Argus manga, and it's a pretty damn solid introduction to the world and characters of the story. It gets across that robots aren't just built for their function, but instead have more personality and life within them than meets the eye. And the purpose Rock fights for, at first his own desire to protect humanity from the threat of Dr. Wily, eventually evolves over the course of the manga into something a bit more profound and character-focused. Throw in some side characters that we'll see throughout the manga's run, and change the stage selection to specific highlighted fights, and you get a really cool introduction to the world of Mega Man and the robots who live in it. The arc afterward finishes up the Wily numbers plotline with Orders to Destroy, where the Light Robot Masters are going to be executed by the world's government, and Mega Man personally has to rescue them as a storm of both natural occurrences and Wily's intervention rages throughout the city. Personally, I love the titles of the individual story arcs in Megamix and Gigamix. They had just enough flavor due to the arcs not being direct adaptations of the games, instead being remixed combinations of games and individual stories from the game's canon, hence the mix in Megamix and Gigamix. This isn't a straight adaptation of game to game, storyline to storyline. You can get something like that from the Archie comic that ran for a few dozen issues before its inevitable cancellation. Instead, Megamix is a greatest hits album where games and ideas are mashed up to create compelling storylines using the Blue Bomber. As such, we get a very different version of the events of Mega Man 2, with the Wily numbers providing much more personal stakes to Rock than compared to the initial games. He's out to save his brothers, who in the previous arc at least had some semblance of personalities, and in Electman's case, character development. Quickman was even set up to be a force to be reckoned with, cutting off Rock's arm with his boomerang, truly setting the stakes for an awesome battle ahead. The one thing this manga does so well is build onto their next respective arc in a naturalistic way. Sure, later on we'll flat out skip introductions of some characters and get them later into the story arc, which is a little jarring if you don't have prior knowledge of the games, but it does a good job of immersing you into the world enough that you don't notice it. So much so that the subsequent arc doesn't even feel jarring in the slightest. This arc is a little different because it doesn't follow any game's events really. It serves as more of an introduction to more Robot Masters and their love-hate relationship with Mega Man, now the world's resident hero. Sure, there will inevitably be a prequel chapter that properly introduces Shadow Man and the Mega Man 3 robots, but this is technically released and actually collected first in the Megamix manga before that chapter, so take it as it is. This is also the first time we see Proto Man on full display, but mainly just the single-page introduction of the Wily numbers from Mega Man 3. Proto Man will be incredibly important from this moment forward, so keep that in mind. Metal Heart feels like one of those filler arcs in most anime before the big shit happens, but it's entertaining in a wacky gag manga kind of way, and ends in such a fashion that it ties further into the themes of the robotic soul. I gotta say that one of the standout bots from here on in is Shadow Man. My guy is made of alien metal, can travel between shadows, and a goddamn ninja. Wily's robots develop some pretty memorable personalities, or at least moments that are fun. They can be dramatic and character building, or lighthearted and wholesome, and are one of the reasons I really enjoy this manga. It makes me care about a lot of the robots you'd barely remember from the past games, not only redesigning them to fit Ariga's aesthetic, but also developing their silly and tropey personalities into fun parts of an eclectic cast of recurring characters. And that feature of Megamix is on full display in...
Damn, son, where'd you find this?
This is where the robots really shine as characters. This is the arc where you actually start thinking of them as brothers. It's not the single most impactful piece of shonen manga history, but it has the bones of good writing here. Despite it throwing us directly past key events that Ariga totally skipped over for the sake of brevity, it really leaves an impression on what narrative heights this manga is capable of. The arc is mainly focused on the Cossack numbers, robots Dr. Wily forced to fight on his behalf during Mega Man 4, created by the third most important roboticist in the Mega Man canon, Dr. Mikhail Sergeyevich Cossack. It debates the very concept of a robot's independence from their intended purpose, challenges the notion of how human these robots really are, and how human prejudice towards robots ultimately prevents both races from coexisting. This is the arc where Roll, Rock's sister and assistant robot extraordinaire, actually does something besides stand on the sidelines. She overheats her internal power battery to save the life of Dr. Cossack's prejudiced daughter Kalinka, freezing to death from hypothermia. It's raw as fuck, bro. It also cements another important robot master from this point forward, Ringman. A police robot meant to stop robot crime, Ringman is the center of this family arc next to his suicidal, battle-hungry brother, Skullman. The robot intended to kill Mega Man, Skullman was kept hidden away from society after their Cossack numbers went berserk. It questions if robots can actually have a life outside of their intended purpose, if their emotions are just as real as humans. Surprisingly, this question of independence is followed up on throughout the story, and starts in an unlikely place. In Megamix, the filler matters. Introducing one of the most important side characters in the canon, but also being a mix of goofy robot shenanigans and theme park combat? Chef's kiss. Setting up the rivalry between Rock and Bass along with Blue's pseudo-mentorship, this arc is packed with juicy little character bits, mainly comedic stuff that inevitably proves to build character. For example, Wily's pretty much bankrupt after his world domination attempts. So the bosses of Mega Man 5, and I'm specifying the number 5 instead of the Roman numeral because it will be important later, become part-timers at a local amusement park that the light robots go to for a day off. It shows that these robots have not only personalities and memorable moments, like the formation of the part-timer brigade and Elecman being an absolute dork about going to an amusement park for the first time, it makes you realize these robots care about their masters, think of them as family even. It stresses Mega Man's position as a known hero, and that his motivations for being a hero are called into question once again. After facing Skullman, a combat robot with a lack of purpose due to his failure for his intended purpose, it makes Bass seem all the more interesting with how he's handled. He's a wily robot, a try-hard Shadow the Hedgehog who wants to prove he's the strongest. Real beta shit at the end of the day when he inevitably loses, but the journey there doesn't end in this arc. This is more of an introduction to him in Proto Man, who watches from the sidelines whistling and occasionally intervenes for the sake of making the fight more fair. Or at least to teach Rock a brutal lesson he'll never forget in unforgiving circumstances. You know, morally gray mentor characters and all that jazz. And while the light robots didn't get the break they wanted, they at least had a little fun before the chaos started. It's not consistent action or testing the morals of our main protagonists like... Now we get into the meat of Mega Man's moral quandary. After the fun but uneven events of Warrior's Day Off, we journey into Rock and Bass's real showdown. With humankind in danger from the efforts of Bass, and subsequently Wily as is the norm, Power Battle is an arc filled with action and suspense that really pushes Rock to his limit. With Roll as Bass's hostage and Bass with a death wish, Rock faces the ramifications of his desire to care for all life, human or robot. It teaches Rock that some enemies won't be allies and won't join his side with the power of friendship or circumstantial alliances. It shows that some people, regardless of their goals, might never change from who they really are. And it shows that those kinds of people, those with a single-minded goal without the desire to better themselves from their intended purpose, may never even have a future unless they learn to think for themselves. Even Proto Man is aware of this, living for his own means and for the betterment of his younger brother, unaware that the man in red is really acting as a guiding hand. It's also the first time we get the inclination that Light is aware that Proto Man is indeed the first robot he made all those years ago before a later arc confirming it. Bass inevitably comes back, so does Proto Man and the many robot masters used in this arc. Without spoiling every aspect of the arc though, it's a bombastic fight that really questions Rock's moral code. That moral code, that desire to defend humanity from harm and sustain human-robot relations, is further developed in the final arc of the Mix series' original run. Shit gets real. Finally, we can talk about Mega Man's Clone Saga. During the events of what should be a straight adaptation of Mega Man 6's World Robot Tournament, Rock is impersonated by a copy made by Dr. Wily, leading to dangerous consequences. With Dr. Light in prison, the Robot Master's on the run, and Copy Rock declaring that he will destroy all of humanity, the stakes have never been higher thus far. Beforehand, the stakes were fairly personal, contained to small stories outside of the initial Birth of Rockman arc. You feel the tension from the situation, as if all things were leading up to this moment due to the destruction of Shinjuku in the prior arc. You can tell that this brutality the Copy Rock embraces is what he deemed to be the natural conclusion of his memory banks, that this is what Rock should be doing. Like Spider-Man's clone saga, however, there's more than just one clone going after another in a grand conspiracy. Instead, it's debating even more that the purpose of robot life and how, regardless of being born as something meant to kill, your life is your own. Your purpose is only dictated by your circumstances and whims to go beyond it. Copy Rock starts as an antagonist through and through, believing his hatred for humanity is right and that his brothers should follow him. It evolves, however, into a quandary about identity. If Copy Rock is really just a clone meant to do Wily's bidding, or if Rock's morals really lie within him. If robots have souls, can that soul be altered, copied, or is it the same person underneath, brainwashed from another master? It's a tense arc that has fun little character bits sprinkled throughout, like Ringman's sick-ass overcoat or Light's robot stand against the copy. Even Cutman, who has had small little moments before this defining his character, gets a moment of spotlight that's really well deserved. This makes sense due to the fact that he's also the first robot made post-roll, the first of the Robot Masters, and arguably closest to Rock out of all the original Light robots. But that's spoilers for later moments. But, with the death of the Copy Rock in order to defend what's left of Shinjuku from eventual base, things are calm and Rock's name is cleared. This is sadly the end of Megamix in publication, however. The final arc being as fun and serious as it would not be revived until the year 2009 with the creation and publication of Mega Man Gigamix. With Gigamix, one tends to wonder what could come after the thought-provoking arc that came before, resulting in, well... So this is the arc I want to talk about in detail. Taking place directly after the events of Orders to Destroy and before Metal Heart, Wily's been sentenced to 2,000 years in solitary confinement. Light, in accordance to the world government, recruits Wily to go to space for a government-sanctioned mission. What mission, you may ask?
Building a fucking giant robot that will investigate alien ruins on an asteroid in space.
With Rock and his Dogbot Rush going with Wily and Light into space, things finally seem good between the two good doctors. Things finally return to an uneasy alliance, a partnership and kinship the two hadn't felt in decades. It seems like Wily's turned over a new leaf. Nah, this is all planned to get the Wily numbers, to take down the ship and to take the giant robot Gamma and the spoils of the ruins for themselves. In reality, the ruins are home to a power source, MacGuffins called the Hypercrystals, found by an ancient civilization. This will be important later. The real focus of the arc, however, despite the battle in space and the destruction of Light's spaceship, is the true showing of Blue's full backstory. Blues, or Proto Man as previously mentioned, was the first robot made by Dr. Light in an attempt to create a robot soul. It was successful, but his power battery was flawed. He desired to strike out on his own due to his limited lifespan, but was found by Wily on the brink of death. Wily artificially lengthened his life for the sake of defeating his younger brother, but is ultimately out for himself and bettering his robotic comrades. Sigma Male Grind Set. Blues doesn't just fight Rock at first, he inevitably fights Wily and defends his family as Gamma goes berserk and requires Rock at his best to defeat the possessed mecha. Able to return to Earth with Dr. Light, Rock says goodbye to his brother for presumably the last time. Stuck on a rock in the middle of space, Blues thinks about his life and how he got to this point. He remembers the first time Dr. Light showed him Blues, the music for his namesake, and died knowing he finally did good by his father's son. Okay, he isn't dead, but that'd be pretty cool. Wily built a teleporter into Gamma, forgot the hypercrystals, and warped back home. That's Asteroid Blues! And the beginning of the end of the Mega Man Mix saga.
Riding on cars!
How about some filler? Like some super plot relevant and fun filler? Not much to go over other than small but key details going forward. The arc is essentially wacky races based on the Mega Man Racing spin-off Battle and Chase. The villain is once again Wily, but a new slew of robots combined with duos of other ones make this journey all the more invigorating as Rock travels from Tokyo all the way to San Francisco via rush-powered car. The standout bot of this arc, other than Roll, once again trying to prove herself and wanting zero help from her older brother, is Shade Man. A wisecracking, pseudo-intellectual robot among the wily numbers of Mega Man 7, he's introduced to be a much more intelligent, fairly important character in the arcs to follow. At least somewhat important, because the main villain for the arc is Turbo Man, a literal transformer who fooled the public into believing he's a good robot because Wily entered his bots into battle and chase under the stupidest pseudonym possible. Other than just being fun, seeing bosses and characters interact in funny ways as they try to make it across the Intersea Highway, it also serves to introduce a very important power-up for Rock, the Rush Adapter. Rush, similar to how bass combines with treble, becomes part of Rock in the form of booster jets and rocket fists. The arc ends with Wily effectively winning the race because he was kept on air due to pure entertainment value, but being arrested once again because of course he is. There isn't much in developing the nuances of the robotic soul other than a robot literally keeping in one of the world's most notorious criminals in their race because of ratings. But it's fun nonetheless to see these robots be themselves in a contained space. No big stakes beyond a cash prize and the usual hunt for Mega Man, Burning Wheel is a nice reprieve from some of the heavier arcs this manga endures. Now, you may be wondering, isn't this a little too lighthearted for what I phrased as the beginning of the end? Where's the suspense, the agonizing combat, the really cool character moments that put these 2-bit robot masters' journeys into perspective? Well, remember when I said they went into space? That secret ruin on an asteroid home to a bunch of Chaos Emeralds? Well... Deep in space, eons before the creation of Earth's finest robots, 2 mechanical deities fought to the death. The remaining one, shrouded in white light, declared himself a savior of justice. Finding and discovering an ancient evil set of extraterrestrial robots, this automaton fought and sealed them away, keeping themselves hidden in a tomb far away from biological life. That was until... Dr. Wily. It crash lands in Wily City, decimating most of the Robot Masters within seconds of its arrival. The survivors only being Wily, just barely clinging to life, Shadow Man as his ever-faithful companion, Shade Man fighting off the evil robot, and Quick Man with his sick-ass boomerang. With Shadow Man going to Light for help, the White Nightmare known as Duo follows. His desire for justice is the only thing he knows, and anyone who gets in his way is swayed to the side of evil in his eyes. Black and white morality, but once again a character with their own identity and purpose. The Lightbots get real moments to shine here. Again, the great Electman and Cutman combo working real well with Rock against the gridiron that is Duo. However, with this unity of robots, both ally and enemy, comes a very Pyrrhic victory against their enemy. For you see, Duo isn't just a robot. He isn't just an ancient force that traveled to Earth for no particular reason. No, he came for Wily. And because he couldn't get Wily, the person responsible for disrupting his slumber, the seal keeping the evil he safeguarded against all those centuries ago finally awakens. Where did he seal it? Within himself. These are the Star Droids. Villains from Game Boy Classic's Mega Man 5, these ancient evil robots only have one goal between them: collecting the Earth's despair, and once it succumbs to that despair, destroying it all for their oppressor god, known only as the Dark Moon. This is where Rock is tested more than he's ever been before. He can't win this group of bots onto his side like the Wily numbers, and he's never outright killed any of his enemies, shock of all shocks. He's almost lost the hope of humanity, but not the hope of his brothers or his fellow robots. Everyone from the broken Light numbers to the scattered Wily numbers like the Part-Timer Brigade all rely on Rock. They know he's the only chance they have at saving the planet. And after destroying most of the WRA bots from Mega Man 6, each defending a corner of the Earth and falling to the hands of the Star Droids, as well as fighting and losing against some of the droids themselves, Rock decides enough is enough. With Blues injured and Base nowhere in sight, no one is left to defend the world he's so dead set on defending. No more hiding, no more worrying about the damages that he'll cause. Rock decides enough is enough. And since the Star Droids are targeting him, he yells to let them at him. And then Dr. Wily shoots him in the goddamn skull. With Mega Man dead and Wily's revenge finally met, the world will fall to the might of the Dark Moon and become nothing but fuel for their android overlords. All hail the Star Droids. for they are supreme. Okay, you guys are too smart for this, he's fine. He just needs robo-brain surgery, but they can't seem to make it work. With the arrival of surviving Wily robots and Cossack numbers acting as the cavalry, Light and Wily are forced to fix Rock as Blues awakens from his pained state. Blues takes to space powered by one of the hypercrystals from the asteroid, the potential to go berserk from its power not deterring him. Joined later by a select group of powered-up robots such as Ringman, Shadowman, Starman, and a hypercrystal thieving base, they journey to space to take down the Star Droids on their home turf. Before that, however, comes a moment I didn't necessarily expect. The sacrifice of someone who's been there since the very beginning. Cutman. With Cutman being the closest in terms of circuitry to his brother, he willingly sacrifices his internal hardware for the sake of saving Rock's brain, and effectively the planet Earth. Rock, barely clinging on to life, thinks of all the robots he's failed, all the people he's let down. After the Star Droids defeating him not once, but twice thanks to Wily, what is there to live for? What is there to fight for? What is his goal for being a hero? With his brother's hand shrouded in laboratory light, Rock reclaims his life knowing that he's done everything he could to save the people of the world. He knows that humanity is capable of growing beyond themselves, being better and doing better, the same with his robotic brethren. Human souls and robot souls, each one different from one another, helping each other, hurting each other. It doesn't matter to Rock if there are bad people like Wily out there. When the chips are down and mankind is in danger, everyone lends a hand. Mankind is good at its core. The soul is good at its core. Mankind and robots can coexist. It only took Rock nearly dying to fully realize why he fought for the safety of mankind in the first place. After a hard-fought battle, Ringman taking heavy injuries alongside Shadowman burning up in Earth's atmosphere and subsequently being saved by Quickman, who's still sick as fuck, all that remains is Rock and Terra, leader of the Star Droids. Protoman suffers heavy damage, failing to stay alive in the vacuum of space once again. This time, he really thinks about his actions, really wonders why he fought for so long to live. He reaches towards the sun, rising over the horizon of Earth's rotation, reaching for the light. With Terra's defeat and Rock's victory almost certain, Terra activates the Dark Moon, and it hatches into the Destructor, Sunstar. In a battle for time and the fate of our planet, Rock reaches out toward the monster, aims, charges, and declares to the enemy before him, "I am Mega Man!" And so, our story ends a month later. Things are as they should be. The world is rebuilding, Shadowman is going on a journey of self-discovery, mankind can finally coexist with their mechanical counterparts. Everything is at peace. Until Wily once again starts the cycle, and Rock is back out on the scene, ready to fight for the safety of Earth another day. I'm gonna be real with you all. I may have spoiled a lot, but I've tried to hold back. I didn't even mention the birth of Rockman mini-manga and Rockman Maniacs 4 Comas, which are both entertaining as well. This manga really changed how I viewed the Mega Man canon, a series with loose plot points until the latter half of the classic franchise and deep into its spin-offs. Mega Man's world is something that fascinated me but never fully delivered outside of some spin-off anime and prequels like Day of Sigma. Megamix and Gigamix is the version of the canon I'd recommend to people. Iconic interpretations and redesigns, fun interactions and blood-pumping action, even excellent paneling, that killer final arc. The Mix series by Hitoshi Ariga speaks to every interest I have in a good shonen, and generally a good manga. I highly recommend it. Even if you're new to the series, it's a great introduction to everything Mega Man's about. Rock on, Mega Man! And thank you for watching.